This is the Better Ottawa podcast. Today is Thursday, the 26th of June. My name is Neil Saravanamuttu. I am joined by Joanne Chianello, John Willing. Hello to you both.
Hello, Neil.
Hi, Neil and
Hey,
Joanne.
John.
Okay. Hey, we've got a long weekend coming up. I think we should let people know that we will not be recording next week. But do you guys have any plans for the Canada Day weekend?
I have 1 million relatives coming from Toronto. Actually, there's only 4, but they're very loud, so it sounds like there's a million. Yeah. So they're coming actually Friday. So I'm excited. How about you, John? Neil?
Yeah, I got nothing yet. But have to figure that out pretty soon.
You're in Ottawa. You don't need any plans. Like Canada Day just arrived and there's lots to do, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so listen, we were going to talk this week a lot about first responders. However, we've had some political intrigue that has come our way in the last couple of days. Of course, I'm talking about Councillor Jeff Leiper announcing that he is considering running for mayor in 2026. So why don't we begin our discussion there? I think there's a lot of people that want to talk about that. And so Joanne, why don't you start us off, set the scene, what happened, why Jeff announced, and who else is sort of chimed in after that?
Yeah, so I should say for transparency, I've known Jeff Leiper a long time, covered him when he was part of the community association. I was a reporter, live in the same ward. I voted for him 3 times. And since I left journalism, we've become more friends. And so I knew he was thinking about this. And in fact, I may have told the reporter who did that story that he was thinking of running for mayor, but I had no idea he would just do a story immediately, like just immediately call him up, because it's not a big secret down at City Hall. But I was also surprised that Jeff Leiper just said, yep, I'm going to do it. Like it was kind of, because that's not usually how it works. I would say that Jeff Leiper's been looking at for end of this year, about the possibility of running for mayor. I know he's been talking to some people and a campaign manager. And a couple of weeks ago, he did tell the mayor, who also had been hearing about it. And I think just to not pretend that people don't know what they're doing, he went to him and said, I just want you to know I'm doing this, but I'm not going to bring the campaign into the council chambers. So far, everyone's being very adult about it. But I was surprised to see that CBC story.
Well, Joanne, the other point about it is that it did cause the CBC to ask the mayor, and the mayor was fairly clear on his own intentions, right?
Yeah, he is also running again. And again, I don't think anybody didn't think he was going to run. I think everybody assumed he was, but now both these things are on the record. So we will see. Okay,
John. So can you tell us a little bit about what Jeff has expressed as the reasons that he wants to run for mayor?
Yeah, I think anyone who's followed Councillor Leiper's political career at City Hall won't be surprised about the things he's thinking about, and that's improving city services, especially transit's reliability, affordability of transit. I know he's quoted saying he doesn't think there's enough resources to deliver good city services right now. And so when we talk about resources, we talk about money, enough money coming in maybe to pay for the things that we need in the city. We've talked on the pod a lot, right, about things, especially maintenance and deferred maintenance. It's interesting. I saw him quoted in the CBC story, particularly about how he's talking about he's from different parts of Ottawa, born in Orleans, spending time in Nepean. Of course, he's been the councillor for Kitchissippi Ward, close to the downtown for some time now. And he's thinking about, the advice he's already receiving from his supporters, talking about you have to reach out to the suburbs. That's the path to City Hall, not just our urban communities. Mm-hmm. You got to go outside the Greenbelt and talk to those voters out there. There's a lot of time until that next municipal election, over a year from now. So there's a long runway, and anything can happen between now and October 2026.
And I would say that one of the reasons I think he did just basically fess up to Arthur White-Crummey from CBC for the story is he has been going on weekends to events in other wards, suburban wards. And I think some people are like, hi, Councillor, good to see you here. What are you doing in Blackburn Hamlet?
Right? Are you lost?
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is he did shave his beard, which was that happened a few months ago, and that kind of sealed the deal for me.
But it's a hard road to hoe. Like it's
Just so you know, guys, if I ever shave my beard, doesn't mean I'm running for office. I'm just putting that on the record right now.
Put it on Twitter. Yeah. Oh, John, don't run in Kitchissippi.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, so Joanne, I want to ask you. So Jeff is what like self-proclaimed, but like a progressive candidate, right? And so we have seen progressive candidates in the past. So we had Catherine McKinney in the last election and achieved 38% of the vote.
Mhm.
Previously, we had Alex Munter achieved 36% of the vote in 2006. And then Clive Doucette in 2018 achieved 22% of the vote. So three progressive candidates achieving results anywhere between 22% and 38%. Now, so my question is, if this is let's just say it evolves into a one-on-one race, essentially.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. Does a progressive candidate have a chance in the city?
Yeah, it is a hard road to hoe, that's for sure. It is difficult. First of all, you're running against an incumbent. Sure, only a one-term incumbent, but Mark Sutcliffe, likable guy, relatively good human, no scandals, right? I mean, you might say he's not a very exciting guy, but we had a mayor for 12 years who wasn't very exciting. He was a record-holding mayor, right? Nothing has gone horrifically wrong. There hasn't been any scandal or LRT debacle or something like that. And so when you're the incumbent, it is like the benefit you get from that cannot be overstated, right? So there's that as well. To your point of progressive candidates, absolutely, because people think, oh, progressive, higher taxes. And I think that is why you will hear Jeff not talk about progressives, and also not only speaking to progressives who are thought of as mostly downtown people, but I actually say you look around council and you see people who are progressive-ish. I think Lane Johnson and Sean Devine, these are folks out in the PN, like those inner suburbs. Marty Carr, like they're not like, crazy lefties, to use a stereotype, right? And I don't think that Jeff portrays like that. I think most of it will be, do people know who he is? And how is he different from Mark Sutcliffe? That will be his big problem.
Right. So John, it's interesting that, we're talking about progressive candidates, but if we look due south of here, New York City, they have just, in the Democratic primary for the New York City mayor job, they have the Democratic Party has put forward the name of Zohan, help me out here. Sorry, Zoran Mamdani. Sorry, I'm going to get that right. Zoran Mamdani. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's
great candidate.
Caused a lot of excitement, a real buzz, and certainly is from the progressive side of the party. In fact, some would say even the extreme progressive side. So is this, does this bode well for a candidate like Jeff?
I don't. I think it's not an apples to apples. I mean, number one, that's an inside the party selection process, the primary. So we'll see what happens in their general election, which I think is in November this year in New York City.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I mean, look, United States. If we want to look at the south of the border to see what happens, to see how it informs our politics here, the United States in their federal election elected a Republican. Canadian election, we elected, a big L liberal. But you don't really need to look south of the border. You just have to look inside our own borders, right? Look at the city of Toronto. In their last mayoral by-election, elected Olivia Chow. Now their election is going to be interesting next year at that race, because there's so many people look like they're throwing their hat in the ring. But also,
that's what happened last time. So then that's how Olivia Chow won, right? She went. I mean, I don't know that Olivia Chow would have won if there were like 2 or 3 main people. There were 10, right? And I think a lot of people thought Anna Billau may have won, right? So like that's the other thing. Who else is in this race?
Yeah.
Well, and I would look at just quickly Olivia Chow's like approval rating, which is really recent. Like last month, Leger was in the field, and I think it's not a great. She hit 48% approval rating, which isn't great, but it's not bad either.
It's not bad
for a mayor.
Yeah.
And so that's a really interesting indicator. And you can look at other, you can look at other cities across Canada too. You can look at Calgary too. But I think, I don't think what's going on in the U.S. is really going to inform our municipal election. That said, there's so much time between the next municipal election. Anything can happen. And just look at the election of Donald Trump in the U.S., how that's impacted every part of our economy in Canada, from the federal to the municipal level.
I also think that's it. Like, even though it's really far out, sorry to interrupt, Neil, but
no.
On the one hand, it is a little unusual to declare so definitively this far ahead. On the other hand, gives you a lot of time to have like get your name in people's heads, right? That like get them used to the idea that you're running for mayor and maybe take a look at you, so because we don't have this long like primary type of season that goes on for months and months and months. So it'll be interesting to see what happens like next year, where we're at.
Well, I was going to bring up the question that John alluded to, and that's that if we look at the last federal election, we look at the last provincial election, despite what anyone wanted to talk about, this was about one issue, and that was Trump. And so the interesting question to your point, John, is there a chance that Trump might end up defining like the municipal election? No one is really thinking that way, but I wonder if that shadow could be cast that long.
I'm going to say no. I'm just because I know we're always hedging our bets, but I'm just going to go out on the limb and say I doubt that very much. John,
I think it looms. I think it looms. Whether it's defining issue of the City of Ottawa 2026 municipal election, I really don't know. But I think it's going to be there in some way, and how it's going to manifest on the ground in our borders, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like, are people uneasy about the economy? And
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cost of living locally, how that's impacted at a more international scale. I don't know, but I think it's interesting. Just jumping off of Joanne's point about announcing this early. Now I think the problem is there's going to be this lens on City Council, this Leiper versus Sutcliffe. I know they're very friendly, and that's great. But in reality, this is politics, and if someone wants to win, they're going to have to carve their path at City Hall around council. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And that's just one councillor who's declared his interest in taking on Sutcliffe. We'll see if there's anyone else around that horseshoe who has similar aspirations to run for mayor.
Yeah, or someone else in the city. That building.
Can I just add some of my further thoughts? So I had three thoughts on this. Number one, I'm actually really pleased this has happened. I'm glad that Jeff has kicked off the process. It is a long way away, but it's also not, right? I mean, it's what are we talking about? Like maybe 16 months or so. And that time will fly. So I do hope that I do hope that Jeff entering the race will cause other people to enter also, because it's good for democracy to get a lot of people coming forward. It was and obviously good to hear from the mayor and get clarity from him. That was my first point. My second point was perhaps it was the fact that Jeff was responding to a reporter. I have to say I didn't find it a particularly inspiring announcement, right? It was, I want to be mayor to fix transit and improve city services. Well, yeah, obviously, right? And so it was, there was a moment, and I felt that it wasn't, it wasn't the moment that it could have been or should have been. But you know what? I guess my third point is that, and I come back to my question about what happened, what we saw in New York City with Zoran, and that's that. I do believe that Zoran was responding to the moment where people are saying that the status quo is just not working. Yeah. And the established ways are just not working for me. They're not letting me get ahead. And I think that there was an opportunity to seize on that, and I haven't seen that agenda being particularly well articulated. So, anyways, those are my thoughts on it.
Yep, very well considered. I agree that it is a thing to take an opportunity to say, yes, I'm running, to get it out there, but you kind of only have one chance to say it the first time. Yeah. I'm sure when he has an official launch, it'll be a bigger splash. We'll see how that goes, though. But that is interesting. Yeah, I'm so happy to be talking about this. I love to talk about election races.
Yeah, me too. And I agree with you, both you and Neil. I agree with you on your point about it was kind of like a kind of a boring, I'm running for mayor, because you do want that excitement. You want to have the energy when you make that announcement and you have an event that usually happens later on before the election year or in the election year itself. And so you risk people not really paying attention to your big election.
I don't know though. Wait a minute. I did get a lot of messages of oh my goodness, I didn't know this was happening. And, on Twitter, DM, some texts, and other people who, what the news cycle is like. You can announce things 500 times, at least 3 times before people are like, oh, is that actually happening? So as much as I do take your point, Neil, I think there will be other opportunities to make a splashier announcement. Anyway, I saw again, we're going to have to be talking about this for the next.
I wonder if Councillor Leiper will announce his mayoral campaign in the suburbs like Mark Sutcliffe did when he when
Mm.
he ran. He went
Maybe
to
Orleans,
Canada,
where he
maybe
was
Orleans.
born.
Exactly. It'll be interesting
Yeah.
to watch for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we will see, I guess. Well, I think it's important just to clarify for everyone that candidates cannot really go into high gear until May of next year anyways, right?
They actually can do whatever they want. They just cannot spend a single cent.
That's right. That's right.
Money, and certainly neither candidate can spend any resources in their offices, both the mayor's office and Councillor Leiper's office, and I'm sure they're both going to be very careful on that. So they can't have a brochure, but they can go anywhere they like, and especially, and that's why you have a big advantage as a councillor, because you can go to an event and someone will maybe give you a shout out because you're a councillor there, and then as you talk to people, you're like, yeah, I'm also running for mayor. Like, it's you know
Yeah.
can tell people, you can talk to them, you can't have anything printed, but it is a huge advantage to already be in office, that's for sure.
Okay, very exciting news. And again, Councillor Leiper, thank you for kicking this off. Let's move on to topic 2, which is we had a report that came to City Committee this week on paramedics, so on ambulances. And that's an annual report that comes forward. And normally this is, just something that comes in and goes out. But we actually had, this update was actually really quite positive. And so, John, I wonder if you can kick us off by filling us in on the results. What did the paramedics report have to say? And, I think one of the key measures that people think about is, if I'm having a heart attack, how long is it going to take for an ambulance to get here, right? So tell us some of the results from this latest report.
Yeah, broad strokes on this, guys, is like they're doing much better this past year. And it's to your point, it's a great news story for the city. I mean, you think about paramedicine and paramedical services. I mean, how important is that to a municipality and municipal government? So to your question, Neil, about the cardiac arrest, heart attacks, there's a target to have paramedics arrive within 6 minutes of the call, 65% of the time. So that's a council metric, and paramedics did 70% in 2024. So that's like pretty high above the target response time, the percentile anyway. And if you look, if listeners look at the report, you're going to see a bunch of stats in there. And the paramedic service is doing well on almost all their metrics. So kudos, to the city, and we can talk about what's happened over the past 5 years to get us to this point. But I know there's been a lot of focus both at the municipal level, but I think at the provincial level too, at improving paramedicine, especially response times. And you're seeing it borne out now, the results in this report that went to council.
Yeah. So John, one other data point that maybe you can help with. So we talked about 6 minutes to get an ambulance to someone suffering a cardiac incident, and their goal is that 65% of the time it would be within 6 minutes, and they're exceeding that. So that's good. And I think in past years they were not achieving that level. There's also this concept of level 0, which I think is probably what we all like everyone would really care deeply about. So can you explain what level 0 is and how we're doing on that front?
Yeah, level 0. Certainly citizens in the city probably have become a little bit familiar with this term if they pay attention to the news. Level 0 is the term given to when there is no paramedic unit available to take the next call. So think about that for a second. A call comes in, sorry, we have no paramedics. And actually the way that calls usually work is they dispatch the nearest paramedic unit, even if it's not City of Ottawa paramedics. So everything comes in like a funnel usually. And so if there's no paramedic unit available, so that person who really needs the paramedics have to be waiting a little bit, could be a lot longer. And so, it's interesting. They've really done a good job of reducing the number of minutes that the city's been in level 0 in 2024. In fact, there's a huge decrease last year in level 0 minutes. After, I think there was a 5-year peak in 2022. So we're starting to see the level 0 minutes come down. And if people are interested in, I think it was last year, it was just over 11,000 minutes that Ottawa paramedics were in level 0. And that's a big decrease from the year before. So we're seeing good momentum. And I know Joanna will probably remember too how many news stories there were, 5 years ago around about level 0. And I always used to get tips as a reporter about when paramedics were in level 0. And you're not reading as much about level 0 instances in the city as we were that
and to John's point as well, that because you're sending the closest paramedic that is available when there is none in the city of Ottawa, the neighboring communities were sending their paramedics, like from Renfrew County, for example, or Eastern Ontario, and then their own people didn't have paramedics, so it was horrible. It was terrible, and so it's really great news to see this.
Yeah,
so much
yeah,
better.
and it comes down to, I think it's like partly a story that we've been also hearing about for a long time, which is this idea of hospital offloads, right? And Joanne, can you've been, I'm sure you were hearing of this story and covering it for many years. So what is hospital offload about, and why does it have such an impact on our paramedic service?
Yeah. So one of the issues is, again, you get you call an ambulance. The ambulance takes you to the hospital. Maybe you're having a heart attack, or you've broken your leg or something, and you're on that gurney. If you've unfortunately ever been in an ambulance or been with someone, you're on a bed. They wheel you into the ER, and then they have to admit you and literally offload you, like physically, administratively, metaphorically. Like they have to actually like hand over responsibility for you to the hospital. And there was such huge delays in the hospital because ERs are overworked and there's not enough staff and all the reasons we know. It was taking forever. It was keeping people, paramedics there for hours, including their ambulance, that then were not able to go and help other people, which also fed into the level 0 issue. Like all of these things are connected. And now it is a lot better. So for example, now the target is the target that the province sets is that the offload should be 30 minutes, 90% of the time. It's not anywhere near that, but I want to say also it's nowhere near that anywhere in the province. And actually, paramedics have been telling the province, like, with the resources you guys give us, like, this is not a reasonable target. No one can meet this. However, like, it went from 161 minutes in 2023 to 122 minutes. So it's getting better. And they've done a lot of things. Like they have a new priority dispatch system. It was launched last year, and it is a way of triaging patients. So they're getting the sickest patients they're getting to them first and getting them to the hospital first and not clogging them up with less serious. I have to say, Kate Porter, my old friend and colleague at CBC, in 2023 did a story. It was the year saying that this was finally coming. It had been ordered by a coroner 20 years earlier. A woman died waiting for an ambulance. She'd had a heart attack. Her ambulance got diverted. That was 20 years ago. And this is how long this system has to come in. They the paramedics are doing a lot of great things. They're doing, like, they have a something called a paramedic response unit, where just one paramedic goes and triages the patient on site to say, okay, they really need to go to the ER, or they can go somewhere else, or they need some other help, right? And a lot of ways to try to keep people, like community care systems, like to try to keep people out of the ER. Like, for example, they were talking at the meeting this week. The paramedic chief was saying, we treat a lot of people for heat and other injuries at festivals, so they don't have to be taken to the ER. So we keep those in the ER. We have community clinics at community housing, so they were getting a shout out for that. And they also have a program that's called the Dedicated Offload Nurse Program. That doesn't sound great, but it's basically nurses at hospitals who are dedicated to only getting people admitted to the hospital, and and getting them out of the ambulance system. So, like, a lot of different people have been working hard to get this going. It's still far from perfect. They said it's still, the paramedics did, they admit that it's still not great, but it is moving in the right direction. And just when you hear all the programs they have, you think, wow, that is a lot of work that needs to be done for even just a small improvement.
Sure. So last question on this topic, John, it sounds like we've turned a corner. It sounds like it's a little bit of a success story for City Hall. Who gets the credit for this, other than the Municipal Panel for reporting on it?
Who gets the credit? I mean, people will say, who cares? Like, people are getting helped. And that's really, look, the city's done its part. The province has done its part.
No, the province hasn't done its part.
Well, I think they have to. Like, I think
the province has done a tiny bit of its part, the minimum it can do. And in fact, considering that actually health is a provincial jurisdiction and responsibility. That cities pay for half the paramedics is already ridiculous. So
Well, I think that informs something that I think we're becoming aware of, and that paramedicine is becoming a important part of community medicine, right? We're talking about doctor shortages, and if I encourage our listeners to read the report, because it's really interesting to find out what paramedics are doing now that they weren't doing 5 years ago. Like, for example, treating someone on scene they're allowed to do this now, treat someone on scene and release them with recommendations on care rather than having to transport them. Like, think about how that frees up time for a paramedic unit. More community home visits, preventative care that they're allowed to do now. So all that stuff, they become a really important part. They always have been, but even more now than ever, a really important part of the larger medical conversation that we're having about making sure our residents and our vulnerable residents have the appropriate medical care. They can't get to a doctor, but maybe our paramedics can help kind of close the gap in some way in their healthcare needs. And I think we're seeing it happen now.
Yeah. And I mean, just quickly, you do have to give this council, this mayor, some credit. Like, they increased the number of paramedics by, I think it was 23, like each of the last few years, and bought 4 more ambulances. Like, things, yes, there are different programs. You can work with the hospital, but you see, even with all of this work everyone is doing to work better, and like I only mentioned a few of the programs, like there's a lot of different ways people are coming at this problem. They've improved it a bit, right? But they haven't solved it, because what you need is money. You need more paramedics and more ambulances. Like, this is not rocket science. And council wanted 40 extra paramedics every year, but they could only get 423. They asked the province to fully fund 17, and the province said no, because the province funds at half. So good on them. I personally think this is the money that people are happy to pay for their taxes, right?
For sure.
$2 million in 2025 for paramedic service, and that's money well spent, I would think.
Yeah. John, you mentioned the report itself. One other source that I would suggest people that are interested in this topic turn to is, I actually first heard about the paramedic success story through the City of Ottawa's podcast. They have that Ottawa Talk. Yeah. And there was an interview with the chief paramedic about a month ago, and he actually was previewing what the report was going to say. That's why, if you remember, when we did our midterm evaluation of the of this council, I said one of the successes has been paramedics, and that was actually, even though it wasn't showing up in the data, it was the chief had previewed what was about to come. So anyways, shout out to the city's website, city's podcast. They did a good job on that story too. Okay, let's move on to our third topic. We had another annual report for 2024 that came out this week, and that was about bylaw, everyone's favorite topic. So people love or hate bylaw, right?
If you're a caller or a recipient, it depends.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If they're solving a problem or creating one. So, John, maybe you can start off by sharing with us some of the highlights from that bylaw report.
All right. Well, so bylaw officers across the city responded to about 98,000 calls in 2024. And that was actually a small decrease, just a little bit. I think it was 1.5% decrease from the previous year. You guys want to hear the top 4 calls for 2024? All right. I'm going to go in reverse order. Ready? This is like Letterman's top 10 list, except it's not going to be as maybe quirky. All right. So number 4, we're going to do the top 4. Top 4. Number 4, noise. All right. Noise complaints. People don't like excessive noise. Number 3, animal calls, animal control. Number 3, property standards. And the number 1 call for bylaw officers is parking.
Everyone's favorite.
I'm so surprised. I did not think we would get that many bylaw calls for parking.
People don't like, I get it. People will complain if they don't like someone parking on the street illegally, over time, not properly parked in terms of physically parked. So, I mean, there's a lot. I think 44% of their calls are parking. So that's a huge number.
Yeah.
And that's where all the work is going.
Yeah. And I presume, actually, I guess the other thing is that parking, I'm presuming this includes the proactive bylaw enforcement, right? Of officers on the streets handing out tickets. I'm assuming
it's by calls.
It's usually bylaw is done by like call driven, but that said, if you do go somewhere like the market or like our main streets, yeah, bylaw officers are there. People see them chalking cars,
But I don't
right?
think I don't think that's included in these numbers, right? And
No?
like one thing to know is people in Ottawa, they love to call 311 and complain. They do. They do. Oh, I lost one of my pods. All right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
well, you know
so-
what? I want to zone in on that item number 3 you mentioned, which I have to say, I fell out of my chair when I heard that. Dogs are and I think about my poor dog. Actually, come here, Tenley. While we're talking, I'll
Here,
bring my dog
doggies
up.
love me.
Come here, Tenley.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the cause of all the calls right here,
Yes.
Neil, your dog.
Yeah.
Normally
So
on 311 immediately. I'll be
there we go.
calling.
Joanne,
Aw.
yeah, there she is.
Aw.
What was the bylaw report saying about dogs?
Okay, so it's kind
this
of
little
hard to like. It's hard to actually extrapolate because on the one hand, animal care and control calls are slightly down, like from last year, but like the calls about dogs specifically, the report says have increased. They have increased, and like a lot of dog bites. So there were only 6 days last year where bylaw did not get a call about a dog bite. Like that's very alarming. Like it's
Yeah.
not just like noise. Oh, a dog is barking, which amazing. Which, by the way, folks, we cannot call bylaw on that. That is not a thing. Your dog is allowed to bark during the day. Like you're not. You don't get to call bylaw for that. Yeah. So 6 days only that the dogs were not biting. They did get a call for a dog bite, and those can be very serious. So that's kind of frightening. And Lane Johnson was asking during the meeting that, she said she was talking with some other council colleagues saying, one thing we should really talk about is like where, all the councillors, they're getting more calls to their office about aggressive dogs, whether on leash, off leash, whatever. And so she said, what's up with dogs? And apparently what's up with them was a lot of people got dogs during the pandemic. And the bylaw officer was very nice. He's like, I don't want to blame everything on the pandemic, but you get a dog during the pandemic, they have separation anxiety. There's no training facilities open to like get your puppy trained. They're not socialized. Like, people aren't coming to your house. You're not taking them places. And so some of them very badly behaved out in public. And so they're trying to do a lot of like education as well, like put better signage in parks of where dogs are allowed on leash or off leash. And, they have summer students out in parks. One of the things I did not learn, I learned in my local park recently from being on my local community association board. There are lots of parks you're not even allowed to take your dog across on a leash, including my park, my Champlain Park. So soon you'll be able to have a beer in Champlain Park, but you won't be able to walk your dog across on a leash, which I found crazy, right? So I think there's a lot of those kind of rules. But yeah, apparently pandemic dogs still causing a problem, which who knew?
There's the pandemic features pretty prominently in the bylaw report. One thing I came across, guys, was that noise complaints, they're down, right? There's a decrease.
Yeah, because of pandemic.
And because of and the quote is because of post-pandemic lifestyle changes. And I kind of like wasn't sure to like cry or laugh reading that. They're like, oh, more people are just staying inside after the pandemic. They're afraid of what's going on. But in the report, it says, people are just going to work now. They're going to the office. They're not at home making noise.
It said they're not at home making
noise.
They're
not at home as much anymore. So noise complaints gone down because back to the work policies are helping everyone's ears, I guess. I don't know. But it's interesting. Another interesting annual report to City Council. Yeah.
Well, okay. And there was a third report that came out to City Council or to City Committee this week. And that was the Ottawa Police Services Ottawa Police Services annual report. Now, I did want to talk about that, and I was researching it, and I actually have to say that I found some discrepancies in the data between what they were like. What they do is in each report they show how it compared to the previous year. So in 2024, they said, here's how we compared to 2023. So I was looking at the previous year's report, and I actually noticed some differences in those numbers between what they said they did last year and then what they said this year they did last year. So I want to actually investigate that data before we have this discussion, because it's, of course, the big issue that everyone wants to know is crime going up? Is it going down? And to be honest,
and it's serious crime or not serious crime, like there's
that's right. And there's not consistency that I'm seeing between what was reported last year, what was reported this year. So I'm going to do that research, and then we're going to have that discussion about police. But on that note, let's turn to the lightning
Woo!
round. So, John, it is, we mentioned it's Thursday today, the 26th of June, and we're saying that it's about noon right now. And the reason I say that is Transportation Committee is meeting probably as we speak right now, or what we now call, I think we call it now the Public Works Committee. But they're talking about the Transportation Master Plan. This is a big plan that we've been developing over a couple of years now, and it's really coming to a climax today, or when it goes to council shortly thereafter. Are we expecting any major surprises at this point, or is everything being figured out by now?
I think everything's being figured out for the most part. It's a huge document, right? This is like the transportation Bible for the city. We talk about the official plan being the really important plan about how our city develops. Well, the transportation master plan flows into that, but it's also like a huge important piece of policy that's going to guide us for, I think it's 20 years. So any surprises? I don't see any surprises, but I did harken back to looking at what they're going to do with Carling. With the big vision is for bus lanes going down Carling eventually. I remember at one time they were talking about running a train, right, Joanne, down Carling, between Little Italy and Lincoln Fields. So things are changing in terms of technology. So
now it's electric buses.
Now it's electric buses. So I mean, things have changed. If you've been watching the transportation plans over time, they change. I know CTV Ottawa talked about the command to bridge and the future of that, whether we're going to have trains across a bridge one day, and that's way in the future, not anytime soon. But to my eye, I don't know about you guys, I didn't see anything that just kind of blew my mind about what the city's planning.
Right. Well, listen, I think what we can do is we can have an extended discussion about the Transportation Master Plan, either when around the time it's going to council or maybe just shortly after. Okay, Joanne, over to you. We've been talking about long-term financing over the last couple of weeks, and we talked about this $11 billion infrastructure deficit that the city is facing for the next decade. And we also talked about how it's going to be financed on the rate side, right? So rate,
the water
and
right.
sewer,
it's going to go up every, it's going to go up, 5% your bill every year, but also there's going to borrow
and then the tax side, so what we pay out of our municipal taxes, which is the roads and the arenas and the fire stations and the dumps and everything, parks, all that stuff,
all those things,
that was supposed to be discussed next week. However, that discussion has now been punted to September. So why do you think we're facing this delay? And I'll tell you, I've got my own suspicions, but why do you think that this is suddenly being shifted back by a couple of months?
Well, I think there are two possibilities, and I don't know either of them. So this is my own just getting at things. One is, it's not going to be good news, right? And so it's going to be a lot of money somehow, and they're trying to figure out how to get that and how to present it. What has to be done through debt, what has to be done through taxes. We have a lot of borrowing room in this city. The council has imposed let me say it the other way. The province lets us borrow up to 25% of revenue, and we borrow about. Council has set that limit to 7.5%, and we borrow under that. So we have lots of room to borrow to fix stuff, but we will have to actually pay higher taxes, I believe. So maybe they just want to figure out how to manage those numbers and figure out how to present them. It also could be look at all these annual reports. We're all rushing around. It's a busy time. June is a really busy time, and maybe they're just not quite, haven't quite got it ready to go. I actually am happy, to be honest, because June 30th is a terrible time. Most people are off. They're not even working on Monday. And I'm sure lots of people, even at City Hall, would like to take that day off to have a long weekend. People aren't paying attention, but September, back to school, back to the books. So I'm actually happy it's coming in September, to be honest.
Okay, good. And then, thank you.
We'll talk
all
about
right,
the budget.
That's it for this week. Covered a lot of ground. Thanks to both of you, as always. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And please leave us a comment. We love to hear what you have to say. So we will not be back next week. Next week is the Canada Day holiday week for us. Well, day anyways. But we will be back a week after that. So until then, this has been the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel.